In today's world, people confuse noise with power everywhere you look. Instagram stories, business meetings, even friendships. People are busy announcing. They announce their goals before they've taken a single step. They broadcast their victories the moment they happen. They even showcase their relationships like trophies. But here's the paradox. The more you show, the less power you actually hold. Niccolo Machiavelli, the most misunderstood strategist in history, warned us centuries ago. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. Showing off might feel like strength, but in reality, it's the fastest way to make yourself predictable, vulnerable, and weak. This is why showing off is the worst thing you can do. People show off. It's not just pride. It's not just arrogance. It's psychology. Every time you post an achievement, brag about a plan, or reveal your progress, your brain gives you a dopamine reward. The same chemical hit you get from sugar, drugs, or gambling. It feels good in the moment. But just like any addiction, it makes you weaker over time. Because here's the trap. When you seek validation, you start performing for the crowd, not for the goal. When you reveal your plans, competitors adapt before you've even made a move. When you flaunt your success, you invite envy, sabotage, and resistance. Machiavelli understood this long before Instagram existed. He saw rulers fall because they announced their strength too early. He saw men die because they couldn't resist boasting. And he concluded one brutal truth. Speech is commitment. Commitment too early is suicide. Machiavelli didn't just warn against showing off. He gave us the alternative. In Renaissance Florence, power wasn't a crown you displayed. It was a dagger you concealed. The strongest man was never the loudest in the room. He was the one listening, watching, calculating, while others revealed themselves through their need for admiration. That's why true power is built on strategic silence. Silence forces people to guess. Guessing creates uncertainty. Uncertainty creates fear. Think about it. Do you fear the man who talks endlessly about what he will do, or the one who says nothing, then strikes without warning? The peacock spreads its feathers to impress and becomes the first target for the hunter. The wolf doesn't bark before it bites. The storm doesn't announce itself, it arrives. This is the Machiavellian way. Silence is not weakness. Silence is control. Machiavelli lived in a time where silence meant survival. Today, we live in the opposite world, a world of overexposure. Every app, every platform, every personal brand tells you the same lie. Be visible, be loud, be authentic. But here's the cost. When you share your goals online, you lose focus because your brain thinks you've already achieved something. When you flaunt your success, you create expectations you must constantly repay. When you broadcast every detail of your life, you make yourself predictable. And predictability is the enemy of power. Psychology proves it. People don't fear what they fully understand. They fear what they can't explain. They fear the man who doesn't show his cards. Modern culture tells you transparency is strength. Machiavelli would tell you it's strategic suicide. Visibility is not power, it's debt. Every boast, every post, every reveal is a chain that ties you to the crowd's opinion. Silence isn't passive. It's not about hiding in fear. It's about choosing when and how to reveal yourself. Here's how the Machiavellian mind uses silence strategically. Do not announce your goals. Work in the shadows. Let your results shock the world instead of your words spoiling the surprise. Reveal selectively. Show only what builds your position, never your full plan, never your full strength. A half-truth is more powerful than full transparency. Control the room with restraint. The loud man seeks approval. The quiet man demands respect. The less you speak, the more weight your words carry when you finally do. Force others to expose themselves. While you remain unreadable, they will talk, boast, argue, and reveal their insecurities. Every word they speak is a weapon you can use against them. Remember, the lion doesn't roar to prove it's a lion. The silence before the strike is what makes it terrifying. Power is not about being seen. It's about being felt, quietly, unforgettably. Machiavelli's lesson is clear. The man who shows off may win applause, but the man who stays silent wins control. Because the moment you need admiration, you become a slave to it. You start moving for reaction, not for results. And once people can predict you, they can manage you, block you, even destroy you. But the unreadable man, the man who acts without announcing, who builds without broadcasting, who wins without celebrating, he becomes untouchable. So here's the warning. The loud will always be admired, but only the silent will endure. And here's the challenge. For the next 30 days, stop announcing. Don't post your goals. Don't broadcast your moves. Don't explain your plans. Just work, build, move in silence. Then, when the results appear, they won't just be surprised. They'll be powerless to stop you. If you're ready to embrace this path, comment below. I move in silence. Let the noise belong to the crowd. You're playing for power.
Woo! Well, I'm rolling past the signs again. The names all fade like yesterday. Each town just leans into the wind, then lets me go along my way. A woman's laughing on a porch, a dog asleep beneath the chair.
Imagine waking up one day and realizing that everything you've built, your job, your relationships, your habits, your dreams, feels like a carefully constructed prison. Not because it's terrible, not because it's tragic, but because it's fine. You've checked all the boxes: education, career, social life, even a few accomplishments you were proud of once. But something deeper stirs in the background like a faint, persistent whisper. This isn't it. This isn't who I really am. This isn't what I was meant to become. And yet, you keep going. You keep playing the role. Smiling on command, posting photos of vacations that feel more like escape routes than adventures. Every year begins with hope and ends in silent resignation. Not to something catastrophic, but to something worse. a slow erosion of your soul, under the weight of expectations you never fully agreed to. Why do so many people end up living lives they privately despise but publicly defend?
Well, I'm rolling past the signs again. The names all fade like yesterday. Each town just leans into the wind, then lets me go along my way.
It's not just you. Look around. How many people do you know who radiate genuine fulfillment? How many are still curious, still burning with purpose, still living in alignment with what they once believed mattered? You can feel it in conversations flat, rehearsed exchanges filled with safe topics and distant eyes. You can see it in the morning commute, in faces pressed against train windows, their minds already halfway gone. You can hear it in the way people talk about the future, just a few more years, maybe next year, once I retire, as if life is a thing to be tolerated now and lived later. But here's the unsettling paradox. No one forced them into this. No one dragged them into the career they hate. No one arranged their friendships, chose their routines, or stole their wildest dreams. Most of us walked into this prison with eyes wide open, holding the key the entire time, and then quietly slipped it into our pocket and forgot it was ever there. Why? Why would a species capable of poetry, rebellion, exploration, and transformation choose comfort over truth, conformity over aliveness? Why would we construct entire lives that are silently suffocating us and then defend them to the death? Could it be that the life we secretly hate is also the life we secretly believe we deserve?
I've seen the sun burn down to red, heard children fight and old men preach, but not one word that someone said could tie me down or try to teach. So I keep walking, wheel or shoe, through dust or rain or neon sign.
What if the real prison isn't made of circumstances but of beliefs we inherited without ever questioning? What if the greatest tragedy isn't failure, but success in the wrong direction? And what if the scariest part about changing your life isn't the risk, but the unbearable thought that you could have changed at any moment and didn't? You weren't born to settle. You weren't born to make peace with mediocrity and call it adulthood. You weren't born to feel most alive only when you're drunk, distracted, or daydreaming about an alternate version of yourself. But somewhere along the way, a quiet agreement was made. You agreed to be less than what you are. You agreed to shrink, to play small, to trade wildness for stability and authenticity for approval. And like most people, you didn't even notice you signed the contract. So here's the question that matters now. What part of you had to die for your life to become this bearable? That question has no easy answer, because it lives in the shadow, the part of your psyche that stores everything you've denied, suppressed, or rejected to survive in a world that rewards obedience more than authenticity. It lives in your trauma, In the voices you internalized as a child, in the stories you absorbed from parents, teachers, influencers, religions, and pop culture. It lives in your bones now, disguised as personality. And so you wake up each day and call it normal. But ISN single quotes T. There is something in you that knows, something ancient, something that stirs in quiet moments and roars in your dreams, something that refuses to be silenced any longer. And if you listen closely, it's still calling. But before you answer, you need to understand what you're truly up against. Because the problem isn't just personal, it's systemic, psychological, and deeply philosophical. It's not just your life that feels wrong. It's the entire framework that taught you what right was supposed to look like. And to break free from a life you secretly hate, you must first expose the hidden machinery that built it. Let's go deeper. To understand why so many people end up in lives they secretly hate, we have to go far beneath the surface into the unconscious, because the real problem isn't your job, your relationships, or your bank account. Those are just symptoms. The real problem is how you were trained to see yourself and the world around you. Let's begin where most of us began, childhood. From the earliest age, you were taught what's acceptable and what isn't. You learned which emotions were rewarded and which were punished. You figured out how to earn love, maybe by being quiet, helpful, smart, funny, or successful. In psychological terms, this is called adaptation, but Jung would have called it something else. The formation of your persona. Your persona is the mask you wear to survive in society. It's the socially acceptable version of you, polished, filtered, obedient. It's the good boy, the good girl, the high achiever, the peacemaker, and it's useful. It helps you belong, but there's a cost. Behind the mask lives the part of you that never got to speak, the wild one, the honest one, the one that still cries out in dreams or explodes in moments you can't explain. Jung called this the shadow, and it holds everything. You had to reject to be accepted. And so, step by step, piece by piece, the real you was hidden not just from the world, but from yourself. This is where the problem begins, because as you get older, society continues to reward the mask but punish the soul. You're praised for working 60-hour weeks, but not for taking time to feel. You're admired for staying in relationships that look good but slowly destroy you inside. You're told to be confident but not too confident, authentic but not too authentic. And so you become split, a performer on the outside, a prisoner on the inside. This is why the life you built doesn't feel like yours. It was chosen by your persona, approved by your culture, but never checked with your soul. Now let's zoom out further, because this isn't just psychological, it's philosophical. Think about how modern society defines success: productivity, status, followers, achievement, optimization, comfort. But what did philosophers like Nietzsche say? Become who you are. A man who has a why can bear almost anyhow. Nietzsche warned us that conformity would be the death of the soul, that the pursuit of comfort would rob us of meaning, that without suffering, rebellion, and inner transformation we would become tame. We are endlessly chasing illusions, success, pleasure, love, recognition, only to find they never satisfy. And Sartre, he said we are condemned to be free, that with no external meaning handed down to us, we must create our own and carry the weight of that responsibility. Most people can't bear it, so they escape into roles, routines, and ideologies that numb the existential terror of not knowing who they are. And so we settle, not because we're lazy, not because we're weak, but because we are terrified of what it would mean to truly live on our own terms, terrified of disappointing our parents, confusing our peers, breaking invisible contracts we never even signed, terrified of being seen and then rejected. So we trade freedom for familiarity. We trade aliveness for stability. We trade authenticity for approval. And little by little, year by year, we build a life that's safe, successful, and profoundly soul-crushing. Until something cracks. For some, it's burnout. For others, a breakup, a death, a diagnosis. For many, it's just a slow, unbearable ache that becomes impossible to ignore. But that's where change begins, not in clarity, but in discomfort. Because discomfort is the shadow knocking on the door. It's the soul reminding you, you were not born for this. You were not born to repeat patterns, fulfill roles, and die quietly in a life that looked good on paper. You were born to ask the questions that terrify you. You were born to break the cycle. But the next part, the transformation, comes with a price, and most people aren't willing to pay it. So, you've realized the life you're living isn't fully yours. You've seen the masks, the compromises, the quiet betrayals of your own soul. Now comes the most important question of all. What do you do about it? This is where most people expect a roadmap: 5 steps to change your life, 10 habits to build a new self, a morning routine that will solve your existential dread. But the truth is, there is no formula. There is only a path, and it's different for everyone. But it always begins the same way: radical honesty. You have to be willing to say the words, "I don't want this life anymore," even if it's working, even if people envy it, even if you've spent years building it. That sentence is terrifying because it pulls the rug out from everything you've relied on. But it's also sacred because it opens the door to what is real. You cannot create a life that feels true until you destroy the one built on lies. But let's be clear, this path will cost you. You might lose people. You might lose your reputation, your routine, your sense of certainty. You will almost definitely lose your old self. And that's exactly what makes this journey so rare and so powerful. Most people never take it. They dip their toes into healing, read the books, listen to the podcasts, but stop short of the plunge because they want transformation without death. But true change is a form of dying. The old story has to burn. The old identity has to fall apart, and that process hurts like hell. It's why Carl Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. But if you do face it, if you walk through the fire, you don't just escape the life you hate. You become someone new. You become someone who no longer fits into the system that built your suffering. You become someone who doesn't need external validation to feel alive. You become someone who is dangerous to the status quo because you've remembered your power. So what does it actually look like, this reclamation? It starts with questions, real ones, not superficial self-help affirmations. What part of your life feels performative? Where are you still chasing approval? Whose voice is still guiding your decisions? What truth have you been avoiding because it would destroy the illusion? Then you start removing what doesn't belong, the job that drains you, the habits that numb you, the people who shrink you, the beliefs that never belonged to you in the first place. You might do it slowly, quietly, or dramatically, all at once. There's no right way, but what matters is that you begin. And as you do, something strange happens. You stop needing permission. You stop waiting to be chosen. You stop trying to explain your evolution to people who never saw the real you to begin with. You begin to live not for applause, but for alignment, not for comfort, but for truth. And you realize it was never about changing your life to look better. It was about finally creating a life that feels like home. But here's the final twist. Even that new life won't save you, because the goal isn't to build a perfect identity, a flawless lifestyle, or some enlightened version of yourself who never feels lost again. The goal is to stay awake, to keep asking, to keep shedding, to keep becoming, and to make peace with the fact that your truest self is not something you find. It's something you create each time you choose truth over comfort, depth over distraction, and soul over performance. So if you're sitting in a life you secretly hate, let this be the crack in the illusion. You are not stuck. You are not broken. You are simply standing at the edge of something terrifying and sacred. And whether you step forward or not will define the rest of your life. The choice is yours. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that every choice you've made, every yes you thought was yours, every opinion you thought was authentic, was carefully planted by someone else. Not by some cartoonish villain in a trench coat twirling a mustache, but by people you trust, people you love, your boss, your partner, your oldest friend, and worst of all, maybe even yourself. You replay the last argument you lost, not because your point was weak, but because they made you question your right to speak at all.
I saw reflections, but they weren't my own. Felt like a stranger in my skin and bones. Every step I took just led me astray, till the night showed mercy and lit up my way. I got lost, but I found my soul.
You remember saying yes to a favor you didn't want to do, only to realize days later that the guilt you felt wasn't yours to carry. You recall how every time you tried to set a boundary, you walked away from the conversation feeling like the selfish one. Something's wrong, but it's not loud. It's subtle. It doesn't shout, it whispers in your own voice. That's the terrifying brilliance of manipulation. It doesn't break down the door it gets you to open it yourself. And here's the true horror. Most manipulators don't even know they're doing it. They're simply playing out patterns that have always worked. Patterns society rewards. Patterns we mistake for charm, intelligence, even love. But if that's true, if manipulation is baked into the architecture of how people relate, how would you even begin to see it? And if you can't see it, how can you possibly defend yourself against it? Maybe you think you're too smart to be manipulated, that you're emotionally intelligent, self-aware, armored by boundaries. But that's exactly how the best manipulators work, by convincing you there's no war to begin with. Think of the friend who always turns your pain into their story. The co-worker who makes you feel guilty for saying no, even when your plate is full. The partner who forgets things only when it's convenient for them, then blames you for keeping score. Is it strategy or coincidence? Are they confused or calculating? And if you bring it up, will they apologize or accuse you of being the manipulator? Now imagine something even darker. What if the manipulator isn't a person at all? What if it's a worldview? A quiet, inherited script passed from generation to generation. The kind that teaches you to be agreeable, to be liked, to not make things difficult. What if you've been gaslighted not by a single person but by culture itself? Niccolo Machiavelli, centuries ago, understood something most modern people still haven't grasped: that manipulation isn't a glitch in the system. It is the system. In politics, in relationships, in the office, in the mirror. His book, The Prince, wasn't a manifesto of evil, it was a manual of realism. A guide to surviving in a world where people often want control more than connection. Where kindness is a currency. Where trust is a tool. Where sincerity is a weakness to be weaponized. But if that's true, if the world really is a chessboard of hidden motives, how can you play the game without losing your soul? How can you protect yourself without becoming like them? That's the paradox.
yesterday. Each town just leans into the wind, then lets me go along my way.
Manipulation doesn't start in the hands of a villain. It starts in the heart of a child. Long before we learn words like gaslighting, coercion, or emotional blackmail, we learn something far more dangerous: that love is conditional, that safety comes when we please others, that being good means being useful. A child learns to read the room before they learn to read a book. They learn which tone of voice makes their parents smile, which version of themselves avoids punishment, which feelings are too much, which truths are better left unsaid. This is where manipulation takes root, not as an act of malice, but as a strategy for survival. By the time we're adults, the mask isn't a mask anymore. It's our face. But here's the twist: manipulation isn't just what others do to us. It's what we do to ourselves every time we betray our truth to preserve someone else's comfort. Every time we say yes when we mean no, just to avoid tension. Every time we smile when we want to scream. We call it compromise, empathy, social intelligence. But as Carl Jung warned, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And most of us trade that privilege for approval before we even know we have it. This is the hidden problem. Manipulation thrives not because people are evil, but because people are afraid of rejection, afraid of being misunderstood, afraid of losing love, losing control, or being seen as difficult. So we become palatable, predictable, polished. We rehearse our emotions like actors. We learn how to say just enough truth to seem authentic, and just enough deceit to stay safe. And we surround ourselves with others who do the same. Society rewards it. Look around. The most successful people are rarely the most honest. They're the best at framing, at managing perception, at telling people what they want to hear, while quietly getting what they want. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this perfectly. In The Prince, he wrote, "It is unnecessary for a prince to have all the good qualities I have enumerated, but it is very necessary to appear to have them." He wasn't advocating for cruelty, he was describing reality. A world where sincerity is less powerful than the appearance of sincerity. Where it's better to be feared than loved if you can't be both. Where power lies in perception, not in principle. And here's what makes it worse. Even when we recognize manipulation, we often can't stop it. Why? Because we're neurologically wired to seek connection even at the cost of truth. The human brain, especially the limbic system, is hypersensitive to social cues. Evolutionarily, exile meant death. So we developed a sixth sense for how others see us. We mirror body language. We modulate our tone. We subconsciously adapt our beliefs to align with our tribe. This is known as social conformity bias. It's not weakness, it's wiring. But manipulators exploit that wiring. They create emotional pressure cookers. They dangle approval like a carrot. They make you question whether your reality is too sensitive, too much, or wrong. And once they've cracked your perception of reality, once you doubt your own instincts, they don't need to control you. You'll do it to yourself. Arthur Schopenhauer once said, "Compassion is the basis of morality." But manipulators weaponize compassion. They turn your empathy into a leash. They cry at the perfect moment. They talk about their pain just enough to silence your anger. They don't deny your boundaries, they simply make you feel guilty for having them. And yet, they don't always know they're doing it, because they were once children too. They too learned that affection could be earned by pleasing, and safety by performing. Manipulation is often generational, a quiet inheritance, a blueprint passed down in invisible ink. You might hear echoes of it in phrases like, "Don't air our dirty laundry. If you really loved me, you'd. You're just being dramatic. I didn't say that you're misremembering." These aren't just bad communication habits. They're scripts designed to erase reality, to preserve power dynamics under the illusion of love. So what do? Do we confront every manipulator in our lives, cut ties, burn bridges, harden ourselves into cynics? Not yet. Because here's the cruelest twist. Sometimes the manipulator is you. Every time you sugarcoat the truth to keep someone close, every time you hint instead of ask, every time you play helpless when you're angry, or charming when you're scared, you're not being authentic. You're managing. You're doing what Machiavelli described as playing the fox. Clever, elusive, persuasive. Because deep down, you're still terrified of being the lion, direct, bold, unapologetically real. So maybe the first step to outsmarting manipulators is recognizing the one in your own mind. The version of you that believes people won't. Love the truth. The voice that says, be nice, not honest. Be agreeable, not authentic. Be liked, not real. Until we confront that voice, every tactic we use to spot manipulation in others will be incomplete, because we'll still be vulnerable to the deepest manipulation of all, self-betrayal. Now, we're ready to go deeper, to examine the cost, because the problem isn't just emotional, it's existential. Let's explore what happens when manipulation isn't just a tactic, but a way of life. What happens when entire societies' entire selves are built on performance over truth? What are they? Unseen consequences?
Names all fade like yesterday. Each town just leans into the wind, then lets me go along my way.
At first, it feels like strategy, a clever way to move through the world unscathed. Smile at the boss, laugh at the joke that wasn't funny, say it's fine when it's not. You don't feel manipulated, you feel in control. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, something begins to rot beneath the surface, because the longer you wear a mask, the more it fuses to your skin, and the more fluent you become in the language of manipulation, whether as speaker or listener, the harder it becomes to know what's real. You lose the signal of your own feelings, not because someone took it from you, but because you trained yourself to stop listening. Your boundaries blur. Your identity becomes reactive. Your peace becomes dependent on how well you can manage other people's moods. It's not just psychological anymore. It's physiological. when you're in a manipulative dynamic, especially chronic. Low-grade manipulation, your nervous system becomes hypervigilant. You enter a state of constant micro-survival. Heart rate elevated. Breathing shallow. Muscles tense. You're not relaxed, you're monitoring for tone shifts, for eye rolls, for passive aggression wrapped in pleasantries. You become addicted to decoding subtext because, in manipulative environments, the truth is never said directly over time. This leads to decision fatigue and emotional exhaustion, not from dramatic outbursts, but from the subtle erosion of autonomy, from second-guessing yourself so many times that doubt becomes your baseline. And here's where it gets worse. You begin to internalize the manipulator's voice. They don't need to gaslight you anymore, you do it to yourself. They don't need to shame you, you pre-shame yourself to stay ahead of the hurt. They don't even need to lie, you've already rewritten your reality to make their behavior understandable. This is the legacy of manipulation. Self-doubt becomes your compass. And if you trust doubt more than truth, you'll never feel safe, even when you are. Viktor Frankl once wrote, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." But what happens when the situation you can't change is the invisible pressure to keep others comfortable, no matter the cost? Society rarely tells us this is a problem. In fact, society rewards it. Politeness over honesty, appearance over substance, the curated self over the chaotic, complicated truth. Entire industries thrive on our discomfort with authenticity. Social media is built on performance. Corporate culture is built on diplomacy over directness. Even personal relationships are often built not on mutual understanding, but on mutual avoidance. We're told to keep the peace, even if it means silencing ourselves. We're told to be professional, even when it means tolerating subtle abuse. We praise people who can handle difficult people with a smile, but we never question why those people are allowed to be difficult in the first place. This isn't just personal anymore. This is cultural. In many societies, especially collectivist or hierarchical ones, manipulation is disguised as respect, deference, obedience, etiquette. You're taught not to question authority, not to disrupt harmony, not to make a scene. But harmony without truth is not peace. It's performance. It's an elaborate dance where everyone knows the steps, but no one knows who they are dancing with. Even in individualistic cultures, the manipulation just wears a different mask. There, it's selling yourself, personal branding, winning friends, and influencing people. Always smiling, always packaging, always selling, and eventually something inside you breaks. But it doesn't shatter loudly, it dissolves, quietly, like color fading from a photograph. You stop speaking up not because you can't, but because you no longer remember how. You stay in relationships where you're not seen, not because you're weak, but because you've been conditioned to believe this is normal. You ignore your instincts not because they're wrong, but because you've been gaslight into believing your discomfort is a flaw. This is the unseen consequence. You lose your inner authority. You no longer know if what you feel is valid, if what you want is reasonable, if who you are is too much or not enough. And when that happens, you become ripe for deeper forms of exploitation, not just from manipulative people, but from systems. religious systems, corporate systems, political systems. All of them thrive when people are trained to distrust their own minds. The moment you lose your sovereignty over yourself, your emotions, your needs, your reality, you become manageable, controllable, useful. You become the perfect citizen, the ideal employee, the loyal partner who never questions why they're always apologizing. And here's the chilling part. It feels familiar. It feels like just how life is, because you've lived with this manipulation for so long. Anything else feels unsafe, even freedom. But the soul knows. Something deep and buried within you aches when you're being controlled. A kind of quiet rebellion starts brewing in your chest. Not rage, just a persistent whisper. This isn't who I am. But you ignore it because you're lucky to have this job, because no one else would understand, because it's not that bad. Until one day it is that bad. Until one day you can no longer tell where you end and they begin. Until one day you wake up and realize you've been living someone else's story. This is not a life. This is a hostage situation dressed in civility. But here's the truth. Manipulation only works when the target believes they don't have power. That's the illusion, that you're trapped, that you have no choice. What you do, you always have it's just been buried beneath layers of fear, politeness, and performance. So now the question changes. Not just how do you recognize manipulation, but how do you rebel against it? How do you break the trance? How do you reclaim your reality, your voice, your power without becoming a manipulator yourself? The answer lies not in confrontation, but in reconstruction. And that's where we go next. There is a moment, quiet, still, often terrifying, when you finally stop playing the game. You stop trying to be liked. You stop managing other people's perceptions. You stop bargaining with your own soul. And in that silence, something ancient stirs within you. Not rage, not defiance, but a truth. Not just your truth, the truth. And here it is. You were never meant to be controlled because you were never born to be a role. From the moment you could speak, the world handed you scripts. Be the good child, the helpful friend, the reliable employee, the agreeable partner. Say what keeps the peace. Feel what makes others comfortable. Want only what doesn't inconvenience anyone. And slowly, invisibly, you became a character in someone else's play. A story written by fear, directed by culture, and performed on the stage of survival. But underneath it all, beneath the masks, the compromises, the yes that should have been a no, was something that never died. Your inner authority. It waited, patiently, silently, like fire buried under snow. And now, it's waking up. The final realization isn't about tactics or defense. It's not about learning how to expose manipulators or master emotional warfare. It's about finally remembering what you are, a sovereign being, not someone to be persuaded, but someone to be met, not a vessel for others' needs, but a source of your own clarity. The manipulator loses all power the moment you stop outsourcing your truth, because that's what manipulation feeds on: your doubt, your need for permission, your fear of rejection. But once you stop needing those things, their game collapses. This is what Machiavelli never wrote about. Because it's not about power over others. It's about power over your own narrative. You don't win by becoming more clever. You win by becoming more whole. And when you're whole, manipulation becomes visible, obvious, small. What once felt like psychological warfare now feels like noise. Someone trying to control your weather from outside the window of your soul. They can knock, they can shout, but you've remembered where the door is and who holds the key. You do. Always did. The final truth is this. No one can manipulate a person who no longer fears being misunderstood. Let that sink in when you stop needing others to get you, when you stop needing them to validate your feelings, to approve of your decisions, to applaud your boundaries. You become free. Free in a way most people never are. And that freedom is threatening to those still playing roles. It's uncomfortable to those still wearing masks. It's confusing to those who believe love must be earned. But to those seeking truth, it's magnetic, because freedom recognizes freedom. Truth calls to truth. And every time you live in your authority, you unconsciously invite others to do the same. You don't need to fight manipulators. You don't even need to expose them. You just need to stop participating. Stop negotiating your worth. Stop softening your boundaries. Stop shrinking so others can feel tall. You are not here to be edited. You are here to be seen. Fully, clearly, without apology. So the final act of rebellion is this: to be who you are without shame, to speak without permission, to walk away without guilt, to love without performance, to live without the weight of pleasing. And when you do, something extraordinary happens. You stop attracting manipulators altogether, because manipulators don't waste time on those who can't be moved. They seek the pliable, the unsure, the eager to please. But when you embody your truth, you become unreadable to them. Not because you're cold, but because you're complete. They look for the cracks in the mask, but you're not wearing one. They test for buttons to push, but you've disabled the panel. They try to bait you into doubt, but you've already chosen trust. Not in them, in you. And that is the end of the manipulation. Not with a confrontation, not with a battle, with a quiet, irrevocable decision. I will no longer abandon myself to keep others comfortable. That sentence is your sword, your shield, your liberation. So now, as we end this journey, don't ask, how do I outsmart manipulators? Ask instead, what version of myself would never tolerate manipulation to begin with? And become that. Because in the end, the genius way to outsmart manipulators is not by learning their tricks. It's by becoming someone who no longer lives in the conditions that let those tricks work. That's not a tactic. That's transformation. And it starts now.
Five minutes on a rainy day, when our paths crossed on the way, you smiled and turned your face away, but in my mind you chose to stay. Stranger man with gentle eyes, holding secrets, maybe lies, like a dream that quickly dies, leaving only butterflies.
There's something terrifying about a smile that isn't real. Not because it's obviously fake, but because it's almost perfect. Just enough eye crinkle to mimic warmth. Just the right tilt of the head to show vulnerability. Just sincere. Enough that your gut falters. You hesitate. And that's all they need. Because the most dangerous liars aren't the ones who stumble over their words or avoid eye contact. They're the ones who look you directly in the eye and make you doubt your own instincts. You've felt it before, haven't you? A conversation that left you uneasy, but you couldn't explain why. A sentence that felt too rehearsed. A compliment that stung. A contradiction that vanished the moment you tried to point it out. And maybe, after a while, you stopped asking questions, not because you found peace, but because they taught you not to trust the part of you that knew. Here's the paradox. Liars don't just distort what you believe. They distort how you believe. They don't only deceive your mind, they rewire your emotional compass. And when you start mistaking manipulation for love, confusion for depth, silence for mystery, what's left of your sense of reality? What if the real lie isn't just in their words, but in your belief that you're immune to them? The language of a liar is not clumsy. It's poetic. It's tailored. It's seductive. It isn't about convincing you logically. It's about entangling you emotionally. They don't need to overpower you with facts. They only need to unbalance your trust in yourself. What's worse, a lie told to your face, or a lie implanted inside your own voice? You see, this isn't about catching someone lying. This is about understanding how they hide in plain sight, how they manipulate tone, timing, silence, and sincerity, how they borrow your empathy as a weapon, how they speak with you, not to you, so that when the betrayal finally happens, you blame yourself. Let that sink in. The best liars make you the unreliable narrator. So the real question becomes, if words can be used to distort reality, what does it take to see through them? And deeper still, what does it reveal about you that you didn't see it sooner? Because this isn't just about them. It's about the part of you that wants to believe, that wants to give the benefit of the doubt, that's afraid of what it might mean if you don't. Why do we ignore our own alarms? Why do we explain away red flags in the name of compassion, loyalty, or love? Why are we more comfortable being deceived than confronting the loneliness of suspicion? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, if someone can lie to you so convincingly, if they can make you question your memory, your perception, your emotions, then who's really in control of your mind? We often think of manipulation as loud, gaslighting, yelling, threats. But what if the darkest form of manipulation is quiet? What if it sounds like kindness, patience, affection, all used to disarm you? Not every monster growls. Some monsters hold your hand while you fall asleep. And if language can be used as a cage, beautiful, polished, and invisible, then how do you escape something you can't even see? This is where it begins, not with accusations, not with confrontation, not even with truth, but with awareness that you are vulnerable, that you are persuadable, that your mind, your most private space, can be entered and rearranged by another human being, using nothing more than words. So before we decode their language, we need to decode your silence. Before we analyze their lies, we must understand the truths you buried to protect them. Because liars aren't just fluent in deception, they're fluent in you.
What could be? In another world at night, beneath the stars shining bright, just connected by chance, fleeting moment of dance.
To understand the liar's language, you must first understand the listener's wound. Because no lie survives in isolation. It feeds on something inside you, a fracture, a longing, a fear, something silent and unexamined, something ancient. This is the hidden transaction no one talks about. For a lie to land, a part of you must need it. We don't fall for lies because we're stupid. We fall for them because we're human. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "What really makes us angry about a lie is the realization that we were not worth the truth." But what if it's even deeper than that? What if we often prefer the lie, not out of ignorance, but because the truth threatens the illusion we're clinging to? This is the hidden psychological rot. It begins early. As children, we are trained to prioritize connection over clarity. We are told what to feel, what not to say, when to smile, who to trust. We are rewarded for compliance and punished for intuition. So we learn to silence our inner radar, that primal signal that senses something is off. We start filtering reality not by what feels true, but by what keeps us safe. And here lies the groundwork for manipulation. By the time you're an adult, you've already been conditioned to doubt your own perception. A liar doesn't have to destroy your trust in others. They only have to maintain the distrust you already carry toward yourself. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre described this internal betrayal as bad faith, a state in which you knowingly deceive yourself to avoid uncomfortable truths. It's not that you don't see the signs, it's that you can't afford to see them. Why? Because seeing them means facing loss. Loss of trust, of comfort, of identity, of the version of someone you wanted to believe in. So you don't confront the lie. You accommodate it. You make space for it. You translate it into something less painful. This is where the liar thrives, in your hesitation. Every delayed reaction, every excuse you invent, every uneasy moment you suppress. Liars read these cracks like a map. They study your pauses. They observe your need to keep the peace. They listen for the stories you tell yourself, and then use those stories as weapons. Do you believe you're too sensitive? Then they'll accuse you of overreacting. Do you crave validation? Then they'll flatter you until your guard drops. Do you fear abandonment? Then they'll disappear just long enough to keep you chasing. The manipulation isn't always direct. Sometimes it's surgically precise. They know what words to leave unsaid. They know the power of ambiguity, how to construct phrases that are technically deniable, but emotionally disarming. They speak in half-truths. They withhold just enough to maintain control. And they know that your mind will do the rest. Because our brains are wired to resolve tension, to complete the story. The psychological phenomenon of closure compels us to fill in gaps, to explain behavior, to find patterns even where none exist. So when someone says, "I didn't lie, I just didn't tell you everything," or "You misunderstood what I meant," your mind scrambles to make it coherent. But coherence is not truth. And here's where it gets darker. The more intelligent or empathetic you are, the more vulnerable you become. Why? Because you're better at rationalizing. You give more benefit of the doubt. You create more complex explanations for their behavior until their lies are woven seamlessly into your own beliefs. Carl Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will. Call it fate. A liar understands this better than most psychologists. They know they don't need to control your decisions, only your framework for making them. Once they shape how you perceive, your choices become predictable, and in that predictability, they gain power. This is why manipulation feels like madness, not because the facts are unclear, but because your own mind becomes unreliable. You remember things differently. You second-guess emotions that once felt certain. You lose the ability to trust your own memory, your own narrative. And here lies the philosophical core of the problem. A lie, when repeated and internalized, becomes part of your identity. You stop questioning them and start questioning you. This isn't merely deception. It's a reshaping of the self. Arthur Schopenhauer believed that most people would rather believe comforting illusions than face raw reality. That's not because they're weak. It's because reality, unfiltered, is often brutal. So we build small lies into our emotional architecture. He didn't mean it. She's just under stress. I'm probably just overthinking it. And by the time you realize how far you've strayed from yourself, the language of the liar isn't just around you. It's inside you. You speak their lines to justify your own silence. But here's the moment of clarity. You can't out-argue a liar with logic, because logic was never the battlefield. The real war is emotional, subconscious, linguistic. They manipulate meaning, they hijack tone, they weaponize nuance. And until you see this, not just intellectually, but viscerally, you will keep falling into the same patterns, not because you're weak, but because they are speaking a language designed to bypass your defenses entirely.
Train crawled slowly through the dark. Its wheels kept chanting their slow song. Next crossroad slipped into the night. Dim lamps We're swaying, lost in calm.
By the time you realize you've been lied to, the damage has already spread, not just through your relationships, but through your inner world. Because a lie isn't just something you hear. It's something you absorb. It doesn't stay confined to the moment it was spoken. It echoes. It shifts the way you interpret silence, read sincerity, and evaluate truth. It alters the meaning of everything that came before and everything that comes after. That's the most sinister part. Lies don't just infect your memory, they restructure it. You start reviewing the past not as a timeline, but as a crime scene. Every smile, every late reply, every convenient excuse. You start noticing patterns you missed before, and with every realization, something inside you fractures. But it doesn't end there. The deeper consequence, the one no one warns you about, is what happens to your sense of self. You begin to mistrust your instincts, even in unrelated situations. You second-guess your gut when meeting new people. You overanalyze harmless conversations. You become hypersensitive to tone, to phrasing, to microsignals in body language. You think you're being cautious, but what you're really doing is rebuilding your reality from fear, and here's where the lie multiplies. What started as their deception becomes your operating system. Because when someone manipulates your trust, they don't just steal your peace, they install doubt in its place, and doubt, once internalized, doesn't stay targeted. It spreads. It creeps into your self-worth, into your capacity to love, into your ability to speak up. You start withholding your truth, not because you want to deceive anyone, but because you no longer believe your truth will matter. This is not paranoia. This is psychological architecture collapse. Your mind is designed to find patterns and assign meaning. So when meaning is shattered by betrayal, your nervous system adapts. It shifts into hypervigilance. You learn to expect harm even in calm moments, especially in calm moments, because that's when the liar struck last time. Wasn't it? Right when everything felt safe. So now, safe is no longer safe. Love feels like a setup. Trust feels like a threat. And kindness feels suspicious. You develop what psychologists call betrayal trauma. Not just hurt, but an identity crisis. Because when the person you trusted most manipulates you, who are you, really? Are you the naive one, the fool, the overthinker, the weak link, or worse, are you becoming like them? That's the final cost most people never talk about. Lies don't just distort relationships, they tempt you to become a liar too, not to others, but to yourself. You say you're fine. You say you've moved on. You say it wasn't that bad. But those are lies you tell to avoid the pain of acknowledging just how deeply you were changed. The longer you keep telling them, the more you disconnect from who you were before the deception. You might even become the thing you feared, emotionally unavailable, a little manipulative, cynical, numb. Not because you wanted revenge, but because you needed control. And that's what manipulation does best. It doesn't just hurt you. It changes the way you hurt, from open wounds to silent implosions. and society reinforces it. We're told to get over it, to stop being dramatic, to not let one person ruin all future trust. But that's exactly the point. It does ruin trust, not just in others, but in your own capacity to detect danger, speak clearly, and protect your emotional territory. When liars go undetected for too long, they don't just betray people, they erode entire cultures of communication. Look around. How many people do you know who say, "I don't do emotions"? Who joke about being toxic? Who call trust naive? Who confuse manipulation with intelligence? This isn't just individual damage. It's a cultural infection. And most of it comes from how society rewards the manipulator. Charisma is celebrated. Confidence, even if it's fake, is worshipped. Emotional detachment is called strength. Gaslighting is turned into humor. We are collectively unlearning how to trust. So the liar doesn't need to deceive you with every word. The world is already echoing their strategies. Think about that. We've normalized phrases like, "If they wanted to, they would." Don't catch feelings. Play the game. Keep them guessing. This isn't harmless flirting. This is strategic ambiguity disguised as romance. And the lines between manipulation and connection are blurring by the day. But you feel it, don't you? That ache in your gut when a message feels too smooth. That hesitation when someone says all the right things. Too soon, too easily. That whisper of anxiety when your intuition doesn't align with their presentation. That's not trauma. That's awareness. You're not broken. You're decoding. But the cost of awakening is high. You begin to see lies everywhere, even where they might not exist. You become fluent in subtext, hesitation, performance. And while it makes you safer, it also makes you LONELIER. Because now you don't just want truth, you require it. Anything less feels like poison. And maybe that's the first sign of healing. Not tolerance, not forgiveness, but a fierce, almost ruthless clarity. You begin to realize you were never foolish for trusting. You were simply unequipped for a war you didn't know you were in. But now, you're learning the language of that war, not to become a manipulator, but to never be manipulated again. At the end of all the unraveling, the confrontation, the awakening, the rebellion, you're left with one thing: silence. Not the suffocating silence a manipulator uses to control you, but the sacred silence that follows truth. The kind that doesn't beg to be believed. The kind that simply is. And in that quiet space, a deeper truth emerges. One that was waiting beneath all the noise. The most dangerous lie a manipulator ever tells is the one that convinces you that you can't trust yourself. It's not about gaslighting you into doubting a single event. It's about severing your connection to your own inner knowing. Because once they've done that, they don't need to lie anymore. You'll do it for them. You'll silence your doubts. You'll interpret their harm as your failure. You'll hold the rope that binds you and convince yourself it's a lifeline. That's the final prison, a self-perpetuating deception that no longer requires the liar to even be present. So, what's the ultimate realization? It's this: your intuition was never broken. It was overridden, it whispered, but you were taught to shout over it. It paused but you were trained to rush past it. It flinched, but you told it to relax. And now, you realize those moments weren't weakness. They were warnings. They were the purest part of you trying to protect your boundaries, your heart, your sanity. The liar didn't destroy your truth. They buried it under layers of guilt, self-doubt, and emotional dependency. But truth doesn't die, it waits. And when you finally stop trying to make sense of the past through the liar's language, when you burn their dictionary and write your own, that truth rises. It's disorienting at first. You remember things differently, feel things more deeply, begin to notice subtle manipulations in places you once called love, friendship, even family. This is the cost of clarity. You lose the comfort of illusion, but you gain something far greater: sovereignty. You begin to navigate your life not through fear, but through alignment, not through people-pleasing, but through inner congruence. You no longer ask, will they like me if I speak up? You ask, will I like myself if I stay silent? You no longer wonder, what if I'm overreacting? You ask, what if I'm finally reacting at the right volume? And in this internal shift, everything changes. You recognize that manipulation was never just about deception. It was about power. And now, you take that power back, not by becoming cruel, not by playing the same games, but by doing what the manipulator never could: being honest with yourself, with others, with the world. Because honesty, real honesty, is a risk. It requires vulnerability, boundaries, clarity. It requires you to say, this is what I feel, without apologizing for it. To say, this is what I need, without shrinking. To say, this is who I am, even if it's inconvenient. The manipulator thrives on fog. But you've become the fire that burns through it. This is what they never anticipated, that you would rise from their web not just smarter, but clearer, softer, stronger. That you would learn how to detect lies by learning how to tell the truth louder. That you would refuse to become hardened and instead become anchored. You see now that truth is not just a fact, it's a frequency. You can feel it in your body, in your breath, in your boundaries. And from now on, that's your compass. No more decoding half-truths. No more negotiating your reality. No more being fluent in the language of those who only speak to confuse. You're fluent in something else now. Stillness, presence, self-respect. You no longer explain your no. You no longer perform empathy for those who abuse it. You no longer confuse drama with depth or guilt with responsibility. You are not a cynic. You are not jaded. You are awake. And with that awakening comes a strange peace. One that doesn't need permission. You stop seeking validation from those who once held your truth hostage. You let go of needing closure from someone who only ever offered confusion. Because the closure wasn't in their apology, it was in your decision to stop needing one. And perhaps the greatest power of all is this: you now recognize manipulation as a sign of their fear, not your failure. They lied because they feared losing control. They twisted reality because they lacked the courage to live in it. They made you question yourself because they were terrified of being seen for what they are: small, insecure, hollow. But you grew. You faced the fire and didn't become ash. You looked into the mirror and chose to rebuild instead of retreat. That is the truth they could never handle. And it's the truth that will protect you for the rest of your life. So, next time someone tries to pull you into their confusion with smooth words and rehearsed charm, you won't even argue. You'll feel it in your bones, the misalignment, the quiet warning. And instead of debating, you'll just leave. Not because you're afraid, but because you finally know. No lie is louder than the truth you now carry inside you.